My name is Natasha. I work for Braman. I'm the on-staff entomologist, so bugs are my deal, but I can still talk a little bit about rats and birds with you. Not as much on the birds, more on the rodents, but we'll do our best. So you guys probably don't think rats and birds are cute, but the public generally does. I've had pet rats. They're very smart. A pigeon is essentially just a glorified dove, but you know the kinds of issues that they can cause, right? Droppings in food, histoplasmosis, a variety of problems that you get from their urine and their droppings. So why control them? They eat and contaminate your food. They transmit a variety of diseases. That's a food safety concern, not only for the people who eat your food, but also the employees that work around the urine and the droppings. Salmonellosis, which would be contamination with salmonella, which is going to cause food poisoning. Some people do die from that. Leptospirosis, which you get from urine and droppings of rats and mice, which causes all sorts of issues, to include death. And then histoplasmosis, if you have a lot of pigeon crap around and it gets dry and aerosolized and you breathe it in, that's where you get histoplasmosis, and you don't want that. They both damage property either through their feces. I'm sure you've seen seagulls pooping on things, pigeons as well. Rodents will gnaw on things, they will gnaw on wires, they will electrocute themselves, mummify themselves, and you'll find their cool carcass later on. But they can cause property damage that way, electrical fires that may be unknown to you, all sorts of issues. They actually prefer wires because it looks like stems, and from plant stems they can get water and food. So they actually go out of their way to chew on these things. Burrowing, so rats are big burrowing animals, subterranean, like has already been mentioned. So in New York, there's millions and millions of rats burrowing underneath all the structures. They're actually moving so much soil that things like water fountains are starting to collapse into the ground. So when you have a lot of rats, they're causing that kind of structural damage. And they harbor parasites. I'm sure you know about the Black Plague a long time ago. Before science, they thought God was punishing them. It was infected rats, infected fleas, and then those fleas biting people that spread diseases and ended up killing a quarter to half of Europe's population. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you might see around your areas. These are the invasive birds. These are the ones you don't need a permit necessarily to control. The feral pigeon, the English sparrow, and the European starling. Now if you have crows and blackbirds and other things, they're actually protected, so you got to think about how you deal with those. But these are the three invasive birds that are not protected. And then of course the Norway rat, which is mainly what I'm going to focus on today, but a lot of those pest control things like exclusion and sanitation apply for all pests in your area. So rats need water on a daily basis. You might think, well, no crap, most animals do. But when it comes to house mice, they actually don't need any water. They can generate their own through digestion. So you can get a nice dry pallet of dog food. A whole population of mice can be living in it and not need a drop of water. Rats, however, need water, so they're going to set up near some sort of water source. Whether it's a pond, it could be clogged gutters, it could be grading issues or water pools, they could be licking the condensation off of pipes or the dew off of grass. So these guys are very smart and very adaptable. And they can travel long distances, between 100 and 450 feet, so they could not even be in this building. They could be on a neighboring property or in an overgrown lot coming over to feed and then going back to their burrows on a neighboring lot. So rats are interesting that they can't vomit. So when you eat something bad or when your dog eats something bad, you can throw it up and get rid of most of those toxins in your system. But rats can't vomit, so that makes things different for them. So how do they get rid of something that's toxic? Like if they know they've eaten rat bait, they can't throw it up. So how do they avoid bad food? Is they eat just a little bit of something and they see if it makes them feel bad. If it makes them feel bad, they won't eat that food anymore. And they also have something called Neophobia, which literally means fear of new things. So if you put out a trap or bait or something new, rats will typically avoid it for many days or weeks at a time. It can be 6 to 8 weeks before they interact with something new because they don't know if that new thing will kill them. So for example, if you have a lot of food laying around because you have a sanitation issue and you start putting out rat bait, why would they eat that rat bait when they've got plenty of food around that's never made them sick before? They could eat that bait and it could hurt them, so they'll avoid it. So what you have to do is sanitation. You got to clean up all those food sources so that now they're hungry. Now they have no choice but to start sampling the baits and that's when you get them. So let's talk briefly about, I'm sure you've heard the term IPM, Integrated Pest Management. It's more than just pesticides. I know we're a company that you might associate with pesticides, but IPM is always doing more than that, right? We don't necessarily do a lot of biological control, but if you had a lot of aphids in your field and you released a bunch of ladybugs, that would be biological control, using another organism to kill your pest. Then you have things like physical control. Let's say you have bats in your attic and you put a light up there to deter them from roosting. Or you have birds on an airfield, use loud sounds to scare them. That would be physical control. What we focus on is cultural control. That's sanitation. That's altering the environment by minimizing food, water, and shelter. And then mechanical control, think of rodents. You got snap traps, you got those kinds of devices, spikes, nets to deter birds. And then finally, chemical control, so using pesticides generally as a last resort and using the least toxic formulations first. You don't want to go in with danger poison, but you can go in with some caution stuff if that's going to gain control. So we don't have a silver bullet for everything. Pest control isn't rocket science, as it was told before. It's not magic. We can't just go in there and make your problems go away. We need your help and your cooperation to make a lot of these pest problems better. We can educate you on what to do better. I can already see some places here. I can tell mice can get in through the store because of the gaps. No matter what place you're in, there's going to be some kind of issue. Even the best places will have issues. So we're going to use our products according to label and law. I've seen plenty of people, you buy something over the counter, all right, mix 1 ounce per gallon. Well, if 1 ounce will kill them, then 5 ounces will kill them 5 times dead, and they'll break the law. I mean, that's how it is. So we're going to do things legally according to the label. We have to be licensed in every state, so we're not just some person straight off the street. And we got to be somewhat of a biologist, knowing how these animals live and what they eat, and things like neophobia and how to combat that. We got to be a little bit of a chemist, because we have a lot of products that we use, and be detectives. We got to read the signs and know where these things are. So what can you do as growers? Let's start off with some sanitation. Minimizing that food, water, and that shelter for these pests. So if you have spills, be sure to clean them up. If you have product, you want to keep things generally off the floor. You want to keep product away from the walls, I believe at least 18 inches. It gives you room to inspect so you can see if things are nesting behind there, if there's chew marks, if there's gnawing damage, if there's droppings, those kinds of things. If everything's against the wall, you can't inspect for those things. Keeping weed growth under control. Weeds provide food and shelter for many pests. Weed seed can feed mice, and again, insects and things can be on those. And it increases overall pest pressures on your structure. You can consider something like a gravel border, and you can keep an herbicide on it, keep those weeds under control. Any sort of clutter that you have, reducing that clutter, inside and outside. So this is, of course, not going to be exactly reflecting on your situation, but you can see here things that are stacked up. They've left a little bit of a gap for us to do an inspection so we can put our control devices. What would be even better is if they painted a white inspection line on the floor so that they know exactly where they can put that product. Here we have weed growth, so we have a Dunkin' Donuts over here. I'm looking into an overgrown lot. Obviously, you're going to have more rodent pressure because you have a lot of weeds and overgrowth over there. And here we have weed growth. This is actually a dump, and there's old machinery. There are 4 rats living in whatever that piece of machinery is. So if you have things that are old, that's just clutter that's laying around. This is one of the accounts we service. You can see all of the clutter here. Things that need to be cleaned up. Plenty of shelter. There's probably food in there. You can get your free bed bugs from this random mattress, pallets and weeds, and all sorts of things here. I think there's the matching box spring over there if you want the whole set. There's all sorts of things going on here. They should be fined for littering at this point. It's just a mess. This is at a dump that we were at, so you can see they're stacking dumpster lids on the pallets. And there's so many rats. They're just wonderful. They're running over your feet. They have scabs. They have no hair. They're running across the road to, who knows, sorry about the neighbors. They're probably not really excited about what happened there. But that's clutter. That's dumpster lids being stored. How many dumpster lids do you really need to keep around? And this is them again. I'm like 2 feet away recording these rats. They're running by. They have naked patches on their hind end. They're nesting on many of them. They're overpopulated. They're walking around during the day. It's just a mess. So this is just a bunch of dumpster lids. So anytime you can reduce clutter, so you go in there, you pick up all these pallets, you get rid of those dumpster lids, and now you've eliminated a great breeding site for these. So when it comes to insects, lots of insects out there. Any sized hole pretty much lets them in. Mice, the smallest recorded skull for a mouse is about dime sized. So as long as they can get their skull through a hole, they can get in. So this little gap between the door, mice can just squeeze on through. So dime sized for mice and about quarter sized for rats. So if you have doors, keeping them closed when they're not in use. If you have dock doors that need to be open for airflow, using a screen, and educating your staff on the importance of what I call keeping the door shut. So you can see this is actually our warehouse at Braman, which is depressing because you can see that there's light coming through. You can get rodents and insects coming underneath these dock doors. And you can see here any sort of light. So I'm looking through one door at another. I can already tell there's an exclusion issue. And here we have a door that looks good. If you go look over that yellow railing, there's a huge hole in the corner there. Rats could easily come in. Here we have a door brush. It's difficult to tell here. I think I had the flash on. It doesn't touch the floor. Not to mention rodents could chew through the brush if they wanted to, but a mouse could get under there without ducking too hard. And any sort of pipe penetration or utility penetration that enters a building, rats love that. Rodents love that. They're going to cruise right in. They look like they've stuffed a rag in there. What you can do for this kind of situation is wire mesh. So I'm sure you've used stainless steel wool to scrape pots. You can use stainless steel wool or copper wool, tuck it into these areas, and rodents don't like the way that feels on their teeth and they won't pull it out. If you use expanding foam or something, they'll chew through the expanding foam. If you use concrete patch, they can chew through concrete patch. So you want to use some sort of wire mesh and pack it tightly. Use a screwdriver and really tuck it in there. So here we have someone trying to do the right thing. You have a dock door that's open. They've got a screen, but the screen doesn't touch the floor. So here we have stink bug just walking in, among other things. I think possums could come in, small children. So we really need to keep that down. So here we have a dock door that's not closed completely. Remember, it doesn't take much of a gap to allow rats to come in. And then old structures, you're going to have rust, you're going to have settling of the building, lots of issues. Again, shove them full with that wire mesh. So I'm focusing mainly on the rats. I know, probably should do some birds too, but a lot of this is going to be rodents. So how do you know you have rats? There's lots of evidence. I'll cover the top 5. You might actually see the rat, right? Like at the dump. We knew there was a rat problem with only being there about 30 seconds. So rodents are going to be nocturnal, but they're adaptable. Let's say you have a shift change at a particular company. They will wait for that shift change. For example, they will alter their schedule if that's when they're able to eat. So if you see them out during the day, usually means there's so much competition among those rats that the lesser rats or the insubordinate rats have to come out during the day to eat. All the dominant ones come out at night. So it usually means you got a pretty big problem. Droppings are going to be your most obvious sign of activity. They don't really hold it in very well. Rat's going to poop about 50 times a day if it's got a good, steady diet. So droppings are going to be found in concentrations. They're creatures of habit. They're going the same path pretty much every day. So you'll see those droppings on those paths. So you'll know that's where the activity is, and that's where you want to put your control devices, whether it's baits or snap traps or whatever else you're using. I want you to remember that rodents can climb above, so if you see droppings, they may have fallen. They may not necessarily be at ground level. So if you want to know what the droppings look like, Norway rats are going to have pretty big droppings with blunt ends. House mouse is going to be a lot smaller with pointed ends. You can see here, this is a big problem. Looks like it's behind someone's washing machine. That's a lot of droppings. I think there's only a path through the droppings because the rodents had to make a path. There's also a roach in the background. They had a lot of things going on there. But you'll have an odor. You'll know there's a problem without even looking at that. So droppings within the first 3 hours can be shiny and putty-like. You'll know they're really fresh, but it doesn't take long for them to dry out, and then you won't really know how old they are. So if you want to find out if you have a previous infestation or a current one, you can take a vacuum cleaner or whatever and clean up those droppings, come back a few days later and see if anything new has appeared. If you got new stuff, you got a problem. If you don't, then maybe it was a problem of a couple years ago or something, and it's been taken care of. So like Hans was talking about earlier, is rodents like to travel with their whiskers, kind of like a blind man touching things, whiskers and long hairs on their body. So they're going to be traveling along what I call structural guidelines. They're going to be along the wall, they're going to be on a pipe or a beam or following a tree root. They don't want to walk out in the middle of the room like we would. So consider electrical wires and pipes and those kinds of things when you're putting out your traps. I'm not going to put bait and traps out in the middle of this floor. They're going to be up against the wall in those areas that are secluded and where they're going to be running. You might also see rub marks. So just like we have oils on our skin, rodents have oils on their hair, and as they rub against the same areas over and over and over again, they leave this oil behind. So you can see there's a rub mark here where a rodent goes, and then here as it jumps up into that hole. So rats are big burrowing animals. So you'll see these burrows outside. 3 inches in diameter is generally how big the burrow entrance will be. I say that because other animals burrow like chipmunks, but generally those holes are going to be smaller. So here's a burrow at a dump. You can see it's nice and fresh. It's been recently dug out. If you have a burrow that looks overgrown or has spider webs in it, it's probably not active. Now if you go kick it in and you come back later and it's been excavated, then you know it's active. They're not going to abandon it just because you messed with it. And there we have one here that potentially leads inside of a building. This is the same dump. They have a lot of trash bins outside. You can see burrows all around those trash bins, which is, by the way, really close to where all those dumpster lids were. There's a lot here. It's a slow video. You might see footprints. So rats and mice are going to leave footprints around. This was actually in a basement, and there were just absolutely tons of footprints. And the older rats will drag their tails. So you'll get these tail drag marks from the older members of the colony. So what can we do as pest control for you? No matter what pest you're dealing with, integrated pest management, the 5 steps of integrated pest management are always the same. You want to do an inspection, right? You don't know what the problem is until you go and do an inspection. Then you identify what's the pest. Do you have rats or do you have mice? Because control is different for them. Or do you have birds? That requires a whole different license, for example. Sanitation, so we're going to look and point out sanitation issues. What is supporting that population? Do you have food sources? Do you have water sources? Do you have shelter or clutter that can be taken care of? And then exclusion, if they're getting inside, how are they getting inside? Can we find rub marks? Can we identify those utility penetrations into the building? Can we look at doors and find out that there's no door sweeps or that they've been damaged? And then finally, we're going to our treatments, how we should control them. When it comes to treatment, we have exterior baiting programs. That's pretty typical. There are options available for organics. So we have organic bait, which is bizarre to me. But if you have an organic program and you want organic pest control, there is organic rodenticide out there. And then targeted treatments. If you have a ton of those burrows outside, we can target those burrows for you. And then of course on the inside, we're going to inspect, we're going to monitor, we're going to trap, take care of those issues on the inside. So this is typical outside protecting the perimeter. We have exterior stations here. We placard them so you know exactly where they are, even when it's snowing. This is the station that we use. There's lots out there. But the whole point of it is it has a stone base that acts as an anchor so small children can't drag these away. It has a special funky key that makes it tamper resistant, so I can't just take out my keychain and jimmy rig it open with whatever I've got. And on the inside, the bait is secured by rods so you can't shake it out. So this is all tamper resistant. I think by law, tamper resistant means a 7-year-old can't get into it with 30 minutes of beating it with their hands, feet, or tools, which I think is pretty amusing. I want to get a bunch of 7-year-olds and try this out. So this should be tamper resistant. You got a 40-pound raccoon that wants to get in this, it's gonna beat the station up. But there's other ways we can combat things like that. So if we have burrows, we can target those burrows, find them, target them. There's certain things that you could use for them, like pellet formulation, but other things that you can't use for them according to the label. So you got to know what to use for certain situations. So us as pest management professionals will be choosing the right product or device, choosing the right formulation as well. You can have the same active ingredient in a bunch of different ways. So you can have the same thing that does the killing, but you got an extruded block, a molded block, soft bait, pellet, powder, and liquid. How do you know which one to use? There's different situations. If you have a very dry habitat, you might use the liquid formulation. If you have burrows that potentially lead to the inside, you can use a dust. You can actually dust the burrow, and as they walk through the dust, they groom it off of themselves, and it will kill them. So some cool tricks out there. Pellets are generally for burrow baiting. If you have a lot of sanitation issues that are hard to control, soft bait is going to be more palatable than these formulations, which are mostly wax, which are going to be holding up well against moisture. And then of course we will apply that product or device properly, right? So I went to a friendly's and I saw some bird work done, and the birds are nesting in the hardware cloth, so someone did it wrong. That happens a lot, I'm afraid. So we're going to put things where the pests are going to interact with it. We're going to do it according to label and law, and we're going to do it with least risk to non-targets, whether it be dogs or cats or wildlife that's out there. We're going to do routine monitoring for you. A lot of people do their own pest control and they kind of just forget about it after a while because it's a pain to keep up with. And also educating you on mitigating those pest pressures. So if you have sanitation issues or exclusion issues, we'll help you pinpoint those areas. And of course, documentation. That's one good reason to have professional pest control companies, accountability and documentation. And of course, elimination or control of your problem. Again, my name's Natasha Wright. Thank you for having me talk to you today about rodents and very, very slightly about birds.